C block. So I hope you guys have your headphones and you've got your printable notes. So anyway, I just wanted to do a video for today because we've been out of class so much. Of course, you guys haven't. You guys are right on target. So, but the other classes are getting terribly behind. So you guys may be ahead of even the people in your block but we'll be on hybrid until after spring break. So anyway, make a new friend, and that's just in the hybrid version of our class. And anyway, but I'm sorry I had to be out today. My oldest son's having his wisdom teeth out, so we're going to move into legal and ethical standards in healthcare. This is, while it is not the most exciting portion of our course together, it is probably one of the most important, okay? If you want to keep your license as a healthcare provider once you get a license. And let me just tell you that y'all have already started to learn, and you know that it's very competitive in healthcare. And so if you do achieve getting a license one day in anything, whether it's nursing, medicine as a physician, whether it's respiratory therapy, whatever, it's so difficult, you do not want to lose it, because it's one of these things that you don't ever want to do again. So, and after you lose a license in an area, you can't ever get it again. So anyway, just keep that in mind as we go throughout this this study the next 2 days. And one of my friends, Cindy, Nurse Cindy, that I work with in the summertime at a camp, she calls me a CYB nurse, which means cover your butt, and that's exactly right. You do have to cover your butt all the time. So anyway. Alright, so here's a little silly cartoon, but you know, it's got a surgeon opening somebody up and out pops a lawsuit. So that really is, in a way, what you have to think about all the time as you in your clinical practice. And that's sad, but it's just the truth. Okay, so let's start by looking at what is law in the first place. So law is a body of rules, regulations, and legal opinions of conduct and actions. They are made by a controlling authority, like you guys have probably all, well, you're going to take government as a senior. You know, our Congress makes the laws. They are legally binding, meaning that we have to abide by them. Alright, so criminal law, there's two types of laws. There's criminal law and civil law. Criminal law is probably what you are most familiar with, because that's the ones that you hear about most often. Criminal law, by definition, is related to violations of statutes that pertain to public offenses or acts committed against the public. So, this is murder, rape, drunk driving. All of these are things that are considered criminal law that will send you to jail, okay? There's two types of these. There's commission, which is a law forbidding a certain act, like those that I just listed off. And then there's the law of omission, a law requiring a certain act, like wearing a seatbelt. If you don't wear a seatbelt, that's a law of omission. And so that, even though it's a misdemeanor, it is still considered under criminal law, and you can get fined for that. Doesn't send you to jail. But like not running a red light, all of those things, running a red light, not stopping, that's a law of omission. Healthcare providers can be prosecuted for criminal acts such as assault and battery, fraud, and abuse. Those things we can be prosecuted for in criminal law, and we'll talk about some examples of what some of those are. Alright, so civil law, this is the other law. This is the area of law related to violations of private rights, okay? So the examples of this would be a contract violation, like breach of contract. Slander or libel. I have no idea how in the world the whole world is not guilty of slander or libel, but we'll talk about the difference between those. Product liability. So you may have seen recalls and certain products or in certain vehicles because the product doesn't work the way that it's supposed to work and it causes injury or causes harm, then that product is recalled, and the company they have liability for any damages or any injury that was caused to people. Family matters. This is going to be civil law, such as for children and in a divorce situation, custody of children, or what's the word I'm looking for? Child support, alimony, all those things. Lots of other family matters, but divorce is certainly one of those. Automobile accidents, that's going to be civil law. If you are in an automobile accident and it's your fault and there's nothing criminal involved. Maybe you were just injured, it was the other person's fault, and you're suing them or they're suing you. All right, so in civil law, there's some definitions, okay? And so the worksheet has these definitions, and this is probably going to be the most difficult portion of, this is just getting all these definitions right. They're all on the Quizlet as well. They're all on the test. So a tort is a civil wrong committed against a person or property. So this may have caused physical injury, resulted in damage to someone's property, or deprived someone of his or her liberty and freedom. So this can be intentional, this could be willful, like caused by negligence, or it can be unintentional or accidental acts that were not intended to cause harm. So if someone's at your house, okay, let me give you a good example of this. If you have a pool, someone's at your house, people that have swimming pools are required to have a fence. If they don't have a fence and someone wanders onto their property and gets in their pool and drowns, then they are guilty of a willful tort, okay, because that was negligent for them to not have a fence. Unintentional would be they could still, someone could actually still sue them. They might not get anywhere with it, but if it was, let's say you had a friend at your house that was swimming and that friend hit their head and drowned, their family actually can sue your family, but it would be unintentional. That was accidental. All right, so what applies a lot to us in healthcare is malpractice, and you've probably heard that before. Most practitioners have malpractice insurance or need to. So what is medical malpractice? There's a lot of times that people think that you can sue for medical malpractice, but you really can't. So by definition, it's failure by a health professional to meet accepted standards. So it's if they fail to meet the standards. They may meet the standards and the person still have a bad outcome. A bad outcome is not always medical malpractice. All right, so here's some common errors that are medical malpractice. Medication errors causes injury or death to 1.5 million people per year. So it is a accepted standard. Remember, our definition, I'm going to go back, is to meet accepted standards. So it is an accepted standard for the person who is prescribing your medicine or giving your medicine to give you the correct dose, the correct med, the correct dose, all those things. So if they don't do that and it causes any kind of injury or death, then that is medical malpractice. Anesthesia errors are a big one. I know some of you guys are real interested in doing anesthesia, and I am not trying to dissuade you from that at all. I think that's awesome. That was originally what I wanted to do, and then I got a little bit scared thinking of all the liability. But I have wonderful friends that are in that career, and I mean, they have assured me over and over, if I ever decide I want to go back, that you get so much training and it's so rigorous that you don't really make errors in that unless you just really are either meaning to or just have totally forgotten what you're supposed to be doing. Okay, birth injury, including cerebral palsy, Erb's palsy, and brain damage. Here's the thing about medical malpractice with birth injury. Parents have up to 21 years to come back and sue a hospital or a physician for something that happened during birth, okay? 21 years, all right? So I've been a nurse this is my 21st year of being a nurse. My first job was in the ICU, and then I worked in labor and delivery. So I've still got, like, the very first patients that I ever took care of are just now turning 20, okay? So I could still be called to a case that happened 20 years ago. Do you think I have any clue of the patients that I took care of 20 years ago? No, let me just tell you, no, I don't. I definitely have memories of some of the things that went poorly over the years that were, in my opinion, no fault of mine or no fault of the physician. But that's why your charting is so important, because, I could get a call tomorrow and say, hey, you've been called as a witness in this case that happened in 2002. So anyway, that's a biggie. But the reason is because, you may not know, a parent may not know that something is wrong with their child until years later, especially till they get to be school age. All right, so delayed diagnosis or failed diagnosis of a medical condition. This is including cancer. Misdiagnosis, for example, a heart attack, misdiagnosed as indigestion. All right, another type is improper or inadequate treatment of an illness or disease. That's another type of malpractice. And so, those of you, I don't know if mostly it's B Block that we've gotten to watch House some, because they're so small and sometimes nobody's in there. Anyway, it's just, we've gotten to watch House a couple times. But if you've ever watched House, it's on Amazon Prime for free. You can see how easy it is to improperly treat or improperly misdiagnose an illness, because it's basically we're trying to rule out what's going on with them. And then surgical error is another biggie. Surgeons make tons of money, okay? They also pay tons of money for malpractice insurance. All right, so let's look at negligence. Negligence is the failure to give care that is normally expected of a person in a particular position that results in injury to another person, okay? So this is something that nurses, physicians, respiratory therapists, physical therapists, anybody in medicine can be accused of, okay? This is why phones are such a big deal right now. They're a big deal all across the country and in every job, but especially in healthcare. Let me give you an example. If I am, let's say I'm taking care of a patient, and I had gone and checked on them at 9 o'clock, and they were fine, and so I'm in another patient's room, and my phone dings. I step out of the room, and let's say it's a Facebook notification, and I check it. I'm not in the room. I'm not with any patients. Both my patients are fine, but I'm on the clock, and those patients are in my care, and I check that Facebook notification. Then there is now an electronic signature. Let's say it's at 9:10 that I was on Facebook, all right, or Snapchat, or pick your poison, okay? And at 9:15, my patient that I checked on at 9 o'clock codes. And I walk in there, they push their button saying they're short of breath at 9:15, and I walk in there, and, then they go unresponsive. I immediately start CPR, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, they will pull my phone records as their nurse. They will pull all my social media records, and there will be an electronic signature saying that I was online on Facebook at 9:10. So a lawyer will say I was negligent and I'll have to pay out or the hospital will have to settle and I'm going to lose my job, okay? So probably not lose my license, but I'm definitely going to lose my job over that. So this is why it's so important to put those phones in those phone lockers, why we're trying to teach you that. I mean, these are real life things that happen to people every day. So these are some of the, I didn't intend to, I should have known better. Should have known better than check my phone while I'm on the clock, especially Facebook. Here's an example of negligence that an instrument was left inside a patient. This does happen, but in surgery we count before we start a procedure, before we do a surgery, we count all the instruments, we count all the sponges, we count all the needles, we count all the sharps. The sharps would be the scalpels, and the needles, we count all that, and then every time after the surgery is complete, every time they go to close a body cavity, we count again. And so anyway, trying to avoid things like this. Silly cartoon. There's the gold earring I lost when we did his triple bypass 4 years ago. Not really funny. But anyway. This is another big surgical error. Amputation or wrong site surgery. So this has happened. Surgeons are supposed to mark what side they're doing surgery on, if it's right or left. So especially on amputation, this exact thing has happened. They've amputated the wrong leg, amputated the wrong arm, foot, whatever, and then they have to go back and amputate the other one. All right, so what is your legal responsibility? Excuse me. So these are the different types of legal responsibilities. All right. So the first one is protected health information, or also called PHI. This is information given by a patient to a medical personnel, which cannot be disclosed without consent of the person who gave it. All right. This is a big deal. Okay. And I think we'll talk more about it when we get. It may be in these slides. It may be in the ones for tomorrow. But protected health information will land people in big time trouble quickly if they disclose that information without consent. HIPAA, HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. If you have anybody in your family who works in healthcare, you may have even heard them say before, that's HIPAA. This is the law that provides standards for privacy of individual identifiable health information. Ms. Crittenden and I were talking the other day. I have no idea how we have, just with coronavirus, it's like HIPAA has gone out the window. If your school nurses, those of you that have been put on quarantine, should not have told you who your close contact was. Like if your close contact was me, for instance, and you got a notification that you had to quarantine, they shouldn't have told you it's because you were in close contact with Miss Price. Now I could have told you, hey, I'm so sorry, you guys are going to have to quarantine because of me. But they should not have ever told you the person who had COVID. That was causing you to quarantine. Now, I know that word gets out, and you guys are pretty smart and usually figure out who it was, and that's totally fine if you figure it out. But, well, it's sort of fine because it really has to be. I shouldn't be able to figure out who you're talking about. But with this close contact stuff, I think you guys, you can usually figure out who it was. This law did, it was on the books as of 1996, but it really wasn't enforced. You see, it starts out, you wouldn't think this has anything to do with privacy. You would think it has to do with health insurance, which it did and does, but there was a privacy rule portion of it as well. But that part wasn't enforced until 2003. All right, so by law, PHI has to be kept confidential and shared on a need-to-know basis. So it cannot be disclosed without to anyone else without written consent. So what all does this include? This includes your healthcare records. I can't just go looking at somebody's healthcare records, even though I work at the hospital, and let's say Austin was admitted or Sydney was admitted. I can't just go and look at their healthcare records just because I work there, because they're not my patient. I don't have any need to know what's going on with them. This also includes any information about a patient, including identifying information. So let's say that I was in class today and I say to y'all, I had a patient this week or this weekend, and she goes to Lauderdale County and she has long red hair and she takes Miss Price's class, and she has a brother that also has red hair, and he took health science at Allen Thornton as well. If you could figure out who I was talking about, then I've broken HIPAA, okay? Because I'm not allowed to say that student, which if you haven't figured it out is Sydney, I'm not allowed to say that anything that would help you identify her. So you have to be really careful with this, especially us living in a small town where, you could be talking about a patient and somebody could figure out who it was. There are exemptions to this law, and that is in an abuse situation. So as healthcare providers, I'm a mandatory reporter. So if a patient discloses to me, or a student discloses to me, because teachers are mandatory reporters as well, that they're being abused, then it becomes my legal responsibility to report that. So that's an exemption to the law. All right, second legal responsibility is a contract. This is an agreement made between two or more parties. This can be implied or expressed. If you buy a car, you buy a house, that's a contract, got to sign a lot of paperwork. But you enter into a contract with your physician without even knowing that you're in it. It has 3 parts. So we're going to look at how it's specifically for in the medical field. There is an offer, which is a patient-doctor relationship. So if you call and make an appointment to see a doctor that's taking new patients, they've made an offer and y'all have entered into a contract. So once you get there and you keep your appointment, and that healthcare provider gives you care, then guess what? You are responsible to make payment for the services provided. Even though you didn't sign anything, you came in, that is an implied contract. You made the appointment, you came in, you allowed the provider to care for you. Let's say you didn't like what they did, you still have to pay for it. All right, so a breach of contract, this is failing to perform any contract, written or oral, without a legitimate legal excuse. Let me give you an example of that. One time, my middle son broke his thumb, okay? And I have insurance, so our insurance paid the physician. So I took him that day to the pediatrician, all right? Took him to the pediatrician. Pediatrician said, yes, it's broken, but it's not out of place. So we're just going to put a wrap on it, and it'll be fine. It'll heal. Don't need to see an orthopedic. I mean, you can if you want to, but, we've got it wrapped up, All right? So that was on a Thursday or a Friday. Because at that point in time, when all 3 of my boys were younger, we had a great relationship with the orthopedic doctors because they were constantly breaking bones because boys are just rough. And actually, we still have a good relationship with Bone and Joint because they still are falling off bikes and things like that. So anyway, I took him to the doctor. I did go on and take him to the orthopedic on Monday. So this had been Friday, Saturday, Sunday. He broke it on Thursday. So 24 hours was Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Now we're there, okay? And they did an x-ray and looked at it and said, actually, this is broken on the growth plate, and it is out of place, and we've got to set this right now. And if you had not come, then he would have lost use of this hand because it wouldn't have healed correctly. Okay, that was a serious, I could have sued for malpractice. I didn't because I loved the pediatrician group that we used, but then they sent me a bill for what our insurance didn't pay for, okay? And I just called them and said, I'm not paying this. Like, you can turn me over to collections, but it was a misdiagnosis. And I know that, they were telling me I was in breach of contract because I wasn't paying them their $20. And I said, okay, so here's what we can do. You can either write off your $20 that I owe you because of this misdiagnosis that my child could have lost use of his hand, or I can sue you for malpractice. They wrote off the $20. Okay, informed consent, permission granted voluntarily by a person who is of sound mind and aware of all factors involved. All right, so not everybody can give informed consent. As a matter of fact, apparently you can give informed consent now in the state of Alabama if you're 16, but in some places it's not till 18, or in some situations. All right, so legal disability, these are people that do not have the capacity to form a contract. So this is minors. Minors cannot sign their own papers. They cannot form a legal contract. Someone who's mentally incompetent, people that are mentally challenged, they may never be able to sign their own documents. Or if they're in an altered mental state. Please remember this one when we get to our legal and ethical debate, or not really debate, but discussion tomorrow. This one will come up if they're in an altered mental state. If they're unconscious. Now, everybody freaks out, if you're unconscious and you're in a car accident and you arrive at the emergency room, we're going to save you, okay? This is different for if it's to save someone's life, okay? But if they're unconscious, obviously they cannot form a contract. All right, last but not least is our patient's Bill of Rights and a resident's Bill of Rights. So this is rights that people that are in the hospital have that are patients, okay? Well, okay, my slide won't go. See if I can get it. Sorry about that. Okay, so these are factors of care patients can expect to receive. They can expect to receive considerate and respectful care. It's sad that we have to say that. Complete and current information regarding their diagnosis and treatment. All right, this one will come up again as well when we get to our legal and ethical discussion. So if they are of sound mind, we have to give them complete and current information regarding their diagnosis and treatment. Now that doesn't have to come from, if you're not the physician, that doesn't have to come from you, but it does have to come from the physician. Informed consent, they have to be informed of what we're going to do to them. Access to advance directives, and those directives be followed. Advance directives we'll get to in just a second as to exactly what that is and what that means for patients. They also have the right to confidentiality, and they have the right to a reasonable response time to a request. This would be like if they ask for pain medicine. What do you think is the reasonable response time to that? Well, basically, you may think it's 5 minutes if you're in pain, but it's actually 30, as long as they get it to you within 30 minutes, that's a reasonable response time to a request. All right, so what is an advance directive? An advance directive is a legal document that allows individuals to state what medical treatments they want or do not want in the event that they become incapacitated. So in the event that they can't speak for themselves, this is a legal document that says what they do or do not want, okay? It's also called a living will, and I'll bring an example of this for you guys to see tomorrow. And then also durable power of attorney. So a living will states, like, this is what I want, this is what I don't want if I were to become incapacitated. Durable power of attorney gives like your spouse or your friend or someone the power to speak for you. So like for me, my living will states what I want and what I don't want if I were to sustain a injury that I cannot survive from, or if I was to become in a persistent vegetative state, or if I was brain dead, or some of those things. It tells my physicians what I do or do not want. If I didn't have that, I do have that, but if I have a power of attorney, this gives, mine is to my husband, gives my husband the power of attorney to decide what type of medical care to provide for me if I was incapacitated. Now, let's say my husband and I were both injured in an accident and we're both incapacitated. When you make a power of attorney, there's a secondary. So my secondary is my best friend. But anyway, because I don't have a sister, and I do have a brother, but we're not very close. So these are legal documents that those people would be called upon to make those decisions. Okay, you don't need one of these yet because you're not 18. Your parents would make the decisions for you. But after you turn 18, it is a good idea to have one of these. If your parents do not have something like this, I just gave you the perfect opportunity to go home and discuss this with them. And we'll look more at that when we tomorrow in class. But because guess who's going to be making decisions for your parents' health care when they are older and they get sick? That would be you. So go look in the mirror. So it's a really good idea for your parents to have these so that you know what they do and what they don't want. I had a lot of assurance that, I was doing what my mother wanted because I was her power of attorney at the end of her life, because she had these documents and because we had discussions about it. And these aren't easy discussions to have. A lot of times parents don't want to have these discussions. They don't want to have discussions with their kids, which is sad because, none of us are getting out of here alive. So we really need to have these discussions with our family members as to what we do and don't want. Do we want to be an organ donor? Do we not? All right, so I've already said all this. If you didn't get it, there it is. All right, a Residence Bill of Rights. Okay, this is OBRA, it was a law in 1987 for the Nursing Home Reform Act, and this applies to long-term care facilities. This gives them their freedom of choice, so they can choose which nursing home they want to go to. Freedom from abuse. Privacy. Accommodation of needs, that they can voice their grievances without fear of retaliation. So if there's a nursing assistant that's not nice to them, that they would feel like they could voice that without being retaliated against. And that just breaks my heart. But obviously we have to say this. That they can manage their own personal funds, and that they have unlimited access to immediate family. So how in the world are these nursing homes getting around this right now during COVID? So I checked with a lawyer that I know, and he said that, and I do think there'll be lawsuits about this because, COVID has still gotten in, so they haven't gotten to see their family members for all these months, and COVID has still gotten in, and patients have still died from COVID because it was brought in by the healthcare workers themselves. Obviously not intentionally, but it's just how it is. So the way that they are getting around this at this moment in time is because apparently safety trumps personal freedoms. So like seat belts, like car seats. You don't have the personal freedom to say you're not going to put your child in a car seat because that's the safety of someone else. All right, I think this is where we stop today. Yep. All right, so I will see you guys tomorrow. Go ahead and, if you're done, do the worksheet that is on Schoology as well.